welcome to this Unleash talk. So my name is Jeanne. I'm part of the Unleash core team. And today we have a very exciting topic talking about pet acquisition and also a fantastic panel of speakers who are here to share their views. So a warm welcome to our panelists. Thanks for accepting our invitation. And a special thanks to Eyas, who will be hosting the panel today. I would also like to welcome all of you on the call. Thanks for following the Unleash Talk series. And some of you for quite a long time, actually, because today is the 21st Unleash Talk, and we've received over 120 registrations. So it's a very popular Unleash Talk. As a quick reminder, we always value your input regarding the topics you would like to hear from this Unleash Talk series. So if you have any recommendation for us, if you would like yourself to be a facilitator of a panelist, you can contact us
I forgot
to
I
either
had this
Tim or
shit, man.
myself via Slack.
Ahorita empezó 12:30.
So just a few housekeeping notes. Please note that we are recording the session and it will be published on the website. And we kindly ask you to turn off your video and be on mute if you are not a speaker. So we should only have the speakers with the video, and I will shortly turn off my video as well to make sure we really focus on the panel. As usual, we invite you to share your comments and questions in the chat. So please do it on the go during the panel. We will try to pick some of them, I suppose, as part of the discussion. And if not covered, we will do it at the end of the session. And without further ado, I'm handing over to Eyas, who is the co-founder of the Pet Media Group from Sweden, and he will introduce himself and the panelists. So enjoy the talk and welcome to everyone who has just joined.
Thank you. Thank you for having us. Thanks for Unleashed Trina for organizing. Just super brief introduction. So my name is Eyas Strecker. I'm one of the co-founders of Pet Media Group. We operate online platforms for to connect breeders, consumers, and shelters, and we do so in 6 different markets across Europe. UK being our largest website, and across the group, we help over 1.5 million pets finding new homes every year. So today we have a fairly, I guess, international panel. Want to give everyone sort of a chance to present themselves, but we have representatives from other sort of online platforms. We also have the pleasure of being joined by David, who's from the RSPCA. But maybe we can quickly, just a round of introductions. Maybe David, do you want to start off?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Eyas, and thanks very much for the opportunity to come on this panel. My name's David Bowles. I do the public affairs and campaigns work for the RSPCA, which probably most of you know is the world's oldest animal welfare organisation, 200 years old next year. So we are in countdown for that at the minute. And obviously we do a lot of investigations into animal welfare, and rehome a lot of cats, dogs, and other animals.
Thank you. Nathan, maybe do you want to go next?
Thanks for having me, everyone. My name's Nathan Oliveri. I'm the co-founder and CEO at Rightpaw, all the way down here in Australia. So we're Australia's fastest growing pet marketplace. We're all about connecting puppy buyers with verified and responsible dog breeders, and basically supporting them through the journey of finding a puppy from search to sale and actually beyond that as well. So yeah, excited to share a little bit about our journey and looking forward to the chat.
Thank you. And Paul, do you want to finish it off?
Hi, everybody. My name is Paul Savage. I'm the founder of Dogs.ie. We're an online classified marketplace based in Ireland. We say that we have everything for dogs, that everything that humans could be looking for. We publish ads based for dogs for sale and puppies for sale and dogs for stud.
Thank you for that. So just to start off a little bit, I thought we'd cover the topic of sort of ethical considerations, and maybe starting off with you, David. From your perspective as a potential pet parent, should I opt towards adopting a dog from a shelter or buy a puppy from a breeder? I guess is a question that we come across very often, and I ask, what's your perspective on that?
Yeah, so obviously as a rescue organization, I'm always going to say go to a rescue to get animals, and a lot of people tend to forget that rescues, they're probably responsible for around about 10% of the market in the UK in terms of dog and cats in particular. But we recognise that particularly buying a dog is a very emotional purchase, less so for cats. And so people will come at this from their own perspective, and that is usually formed in their childhood. I mean, it's a fact that many people who've had a certain breed of dog when they've been growing up want that breed of dog when they become an adult. And of course, then you come down to, so do rescues provide that breed of dog at that age that person is asking for? And the answer may be no, particularly if you're looking for a French bulldog or a puppy or a Chihuahua, then I'm afraid we don't have many in our care at the moment. We have mainly Heinz 57s, and we have mainly adult dogs and cats. So I understand when people go to a breeder. There is no difference between in terms of provenance. In fact, I would always say that going to rescue, you have more provenance, you have more oversight in terms of where the dog or cat or other animal has come from, its vaccination history, its microchip history, particularly if it's been imported, you've got no idea where it's come from. Whereas I can guarantee where that dog has come from, how it's been seen by a vet, what its vaccination history is. So I would always say for anything, just if you're thinking of getting any animal, but particularly a dog and cat, do your research and make sure you trust the person that you're getting the animal from, whether it's a rescue or it's a breeder.
Thank you, David. Yeah, I think something that we come across quite often. So just for context, we offer consumers to find dogs and puppies both through breeders and through shelters. And I think we come across what you just mentioned, which is this risk aversion of, do I know what I'm getting when I go and adopt a dog? Do I know its history? Do I know its health records and so on? But just to build a little bit on that, maybe Paul, based on your experience from Ireland, what are some reasons you see why consumers might still opt to actually buy a puppy from a breeder rather than adopting from a shelter or rescue?
I think David covered a couple of those points, that just the availability of certain breeds. Often people are really interested in getting a younger dog, so that they can be there through the early stages for training especially, and also part of that bonding. And of course, when it's an older dog versus a younger dog, maybe there's a reason why this dog was returned or is being sold on. So that's one of the factors. All of the charities and rescues would have their own channels as well for advertising on their own websites. Sometimes some of the things that we've heard back is that, when they, charities and rescues tend to do home checks, and some of these they wouldn't meet the requirements of a home check. So this would be probably one of the reasons where people have to figure out other ways of getting their pets.
Yeah. Well, thank you. So just maybe David, back to you. You've been in this sort of animal welfare space for, I guess, close to or maybe slightly above 30 years, and you've probably seen a lot of the regulatory changes that have happened, particularly in the UK in the last, say, 5-10 years. What are some of the major trends you've spotted in terms of regulation that might be shaping regulation then across continental Europe as well?
Yeah, so the major trends is that governments both in the UK and continental Europe recognise that there are the illegal trade in puppies in particular, but to a certain extent cats is a big problem. People are making money out of consumers' misery because they are giving them essentially a substandard product, either because they're lying about where it's come from, or it's sick and it has to then go to the vet. So legislators want to try and crack down on this trade. It's a fact that the trade has gone into puppies in particular because it's easy money for them. And whereas before they may have dabbled in say drugs, where the punishments are quite severe, they know that the punishments for illegally trafficking puppies are less severe. So in the UK, we've only just raised our prison sentence from 6 months to 5 years for illegal puppy smuggling. And it's pretty similar picture across Europe. So if you're going to make easy money with little consequences, my advice to criminals is go into the puppy trade. And legislators want to crack down on that. But of course, where they are trying to do this, either by looking at the importation issue, and don't forget, obviously, the UK has slightly different rules now. We are outside the EU, so we have border controls. Whereas if you're inside of the EU, a dog can go perfectly well from Romania right across to Portugal without any controls, and that's a big problem. So yes, there is a desire to crack down on the trade. They are looking at introducing licensing, whether that is for selling an animal or breeding a dog or breeding a cat, and they are also looking at introducing better health checks. At the moment, it's only mandatory to screen your dog and cat for rabies. The RSPCA would like that to be increased to other diseases like leishmaniasis or brucellosis, and I think we are starting to move in that direction. But unfortunately, criminals are very clever, and we're playing catch up. They are much faster at changing their business model than the legislators are at trying to close those loopholes. And yes, we have seen a lot of progress on this in the last few years. But if COVID taught us anything, and it really did teach us that the dog market expanded hugely under COVID, which nobody expected, I don't think. But it also showed us very clearly where the weak points in that trail was on the dog market, and particularly selling, but also breeding and transporting those dogs across. And this goes back to the point I made earlier about the consumer. If we're having a product, in this case, a dog or a cat being sold to the consumer, they must have total transparency on that product trail and faith in the person that's selling them. And at the moment, unfortunately, we don't for dogs in particular.
Thank you, David. Thank you. I mean, just to build on that a little bit, maybe over to you, Nathan. To my understanding, at RightPaw, you sort of vet every breeder on your platform one by one in some sort of onboarding. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about that and how you ensure that you only have reputable good breeders on your platform.
Yeah, 100%. And I think David hit the nail on the head with that word transparency. And I think transparency really is, I think, at the heart of creating a great marketplace for the sale of dogs as well. And it's something that we have at the heart of what we do. And ultimately, you want to give buyers peace of mind that they're buying from a responsible source. So when we started RightPaw, which was a little over 3 years ago, one of our key sort of guiding principles was that we wanted to be able to provide buyers that confidence. So our chief veterinary officer, who works with our team as well, developed our own RightPaw code of ethics, which is in line with the Australian sort of national best practice and also our best practice association guidelines as well. And every breeder who signs up to join our platform, before they get published, before they get verified on the site, has to go through a verification process with us. So we get on a call with them, we collect evidence on the code, we check their registration credentials, we actually check their health testing as well, which is displayed on their profile. So you can see who's testing for hip dysplasia or particular genetic condition. We check that as well. And we also even get on a video call with the breeder as well, just so that we can meet the dogs, see their living environment. And it's only after they pass that check that we then publish their profile live and they can start to receive applications. And obviously that is, an involved process, but for us, we see it as one of our key USPs, something that sets us apart. And it also creates a strong sense of community for the breeders as well. They feel very proud to be part of that community. It also creates, again, a strong sense of sort of a self-policing environment as well, where the breeders are actually making sure that other breeders on the platform are doing the right thing, creates sort of like, a culture of, self-reporting as well, which is a great thing. So for the breeders, they love being part of that community, and the buyers feel confident that everyone's held to a high standard. So that's something that we've been working through now over the last couple of years, and we feel, is really important.
Thank you, Nathan. Yeah, it's super interesting. I think it resonates well with what we've seen at PMG, which is, the further you move away from breeders being able to be entirely anonymous on your platform, the stronger of a filter you create to keep those sort of unscrupulous, bad actors away.
Yeah,
I'd love to see the sort of the one-to-one approach in terms of onboarding.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say we often find that the fact that we ask for that little bit more information actually keeps the bad actors out, because they don't want to be as visible. They don't want to go through the the process of actually being transparent. So yeah, it's very true.
Yeah, and just to touch upon that a little bit, maybe Paul, with you, what responsibilities do you think online platforms have to actually know the identities of its breeders or advertisers? Do you perhaps even think there should be a sort of legal requirement for platforms to know the true identities of its advertisers?
So I think we already know a lot of information when we start off. We obviously have their email address, we have their telephone number that we verify. So there is already a trail. In Ireland, you can't advertise a puppy before it's microchipped, so that registration has already happened as well. And an ID verification happens when you microchip that puppy at the vets. So the vet will check proof of address and a proof of ID. So that's sort of, let's call it that chain of custody already exists. I think, we also have other information around these sellers as well. So of course we have their credit card details and we charge them to place an ad. So it's definitely not anonymous. It is possible, and we do it in cases where we check, ID with a selfie check and things like this. This works out really well in the cases that we're not sure of people's identity. But I think it's also important to let consumers know that when they go to visit the puppy, just when they will ask to see your ID for that chain of custody with the microchip, that you should also require that as well. Us as online platforms, there's a lot of things we can do, and there's a lot of advice we can do. But the hard part is when you have got a fluffy puppy with, that's sitting in your arms. A lot of sense tends to go out the window, I think. And most of the time that doesn't cause an issue. But it's definitely those cases where we see issues happening. It's generally where people have forgotten some common sense. So we give advice like, don't bring a young child to see a puppy, because they're never going to come away without taking that puppy, right? So we can of course step up our game, but I think it's also down to consumers as well to be aware. It's also down to breeders to vet people and to think about those types of things, right? Like, is this dog going to be suitable for a house that doesn't have a garden or things like that, if it's going to be especially a large dog? So I think that regulation is great. Generally, we tend to try and take one step ahead of the regulation to set our own boundaries. Now, is that the best way of doing it? I'm not 100% sure. I think we all have a role to play and making sure that everybody's kept safe. Back to one of David's points, these breeders who want to get around the systems will always endeavor to get around the systems. And that's the, you still want to make buying, selling dogs online or whichever way, you want to make that still accessible, right? And sometimes if we're just making laws to catch that the 1% or the 0.1%, I think that there needs to be sometimes a sanity check and go, how does this actually work? What is this for the breeder? A lot of the times when regulation comes along, we're involved in the conversations. The animal charities are involved in the conversations, but a lot of times those breeders are not represented. And I think that it would also be a good one to hear their voice in some of these conversations with legislation.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you. I just want to maybe mention to the listeners as well, if you have any questions, feel free to just ping them into the chat and we'll try to incorporate them as we go along, or we'll leave some time at the end for Q&A. Maybe on that topic of sort of consumer responsibility, David, how much of the responsibility do you think lies on the consumer to make an informed and educated decision as to, for example, which breed or which breeder to commit to? Yeah,
so Paul's absolutely right. The responsibility should be on the consumer, but we know from a lot of research that particularly for puppy and dog purchases, it is an emotional purchase, and once the consumer has made up their mind, which could be on day one, that they are going to buy this type of dog at this breed at this age, they're going to do it, and it's very, very difficult to interrupt that behavior. And so what you have to do, and what responsible breeders or rescues or advertising sites have to do, is to give them as much information as possible and to close down any possible loopholes. And I think Ireland is actually quite leading the way in terms of the controls that they have in place on that particular issue. But it's really important to know that having worked out that this is an emotional purchase, and you can't really disrupt that method, then you have to try and identify, okay, so what can you do to make sure that the illegal people are not getting in control of this. We in the UK, we work very closely with the breeders. We work very closely with the Kennel Club, for instance. They are part of our legislative group who give advice to the government. But the main thing that is against us is time, because once a person has made that purchase decision in their own mind, they want that animal as quickly as possible. And if you're a responsible rescue or a responsible breeder or even a responsible pet advertising site, you are trying to slow down that process because you are doing the proper checks, which are all great. But for the person that's trying to buy it, there comes the frustration. And that's when you get the consumer going off and going, oh, I can't be bothered to wait for all these things. I'm just going to give £1,000 in used notes to somebody on a service station on the motorway. And then, unfortunately, you get buyer's remorse when the puppy becomes sick, because obviously the criminal element will feed on that insecurity, and the puppy will get sick. The person will then have to pay a large amount of vet fees. So I'm not underestimating the difficulty of the task that we have, but I think we are getting much better in trying to work out where the loopholes are, how to give the consumer the information they need to make the right choices. But it is tricky.
Yeah, no, it certainly is. I mean, maybe Nathan, I know you record a very entertaining, I guess, bi-weekly podcast called What the Bark. What are some of the topics you feel consumers generally are the least educated about when it comes to sort of embarking on the journey of buying a pet?
Yeah, it's a good amount of fun. We try to put education at the forefront as well of that journey, and for all buyers coming through the site, we have a number of resources, whether it's blog or podcast, to try and get them thinking all of the same things that Paul and David just mentioned. Being really considered when embarking on that journey. So things which we try to educate on and which potentially buyers aren't as aware of. Simple things like what credentials should my breeder have in my country? How should they be registered? What should I be checking for? What health testing is important for my breed? What should the requisite testing be done on the parents? And that obviously varies per breed as well. On top of that, they might not have questions about, or they might have questions about how do I visit the breeder? How do I, when I visit the breeder's premises, what should I be looking for? Or, what does an appropriate pickup look like? And a lot of people, when a breeder volunteers to meet them, on the side of the road or at a halfway point, they think that the breeder's being convenient, whereas sometimes it could actually be masking something nefarious, and the breeder not wanting to disclose where they live or where the puppies are raised. So just being able to let the buyers know what are some of those red flags, what are some of the things that they should be aware of. And then actually, we also try to do a little bit of work on the first sort of 1 to 2 months when they bring the puppy home, because we actually believe that's also a really important time for ensuring that the puppy has the best start to life, that the owners are doing the right training, putting in the effort at the very beginning. And our whole belief is that if you put in the work at the beginning as a buyer, you're much more likely to set your puppy up for success, and ultimately stem the tide of hopefully dogs ending up in shelters, because you've put in the work at the beginning to build a good relationship and set the foundations for your pup. So it's both in the search, but I'd say it's also very important in that first sort of 1 to 2 months, socialization, setting up your home, establishing the right behaviors, all critical.
Thank you. Great. So maybe just coming into the, I guess, technology tracking side of it a little bit. You, David, microchipping of dogs has long been a legal requirement in the UK, and I think the next year, June 2024, microchipping of cats will become mandatory. What are some of the impacts you expect to see from that law coming into power?
So, and this may sound strange, but when governments pass laws, they rarely actually look at how well the law has worked and how it's been implemented. But we have now some pretty good evidence on dog microchipping in the UK. Dog microchipping was made mandatory in 2016. It almost immediately saw a decrease in the number of stray dogs. It saw an increase in the number of dogs being reunited back with their owner, all of which you'd expect. And it saw an increase in the number of dogs that were microchipped from around 70% to around 90% now, which is great. There is still an issue with people not keeping the details on their microchip up to date. You know, they move house and they forget to update their details. And so therefore the microchip, although it's in the dog, is pretty useless because you can't contact the person, which is the whole point of the microchip. But by and large, we have seen some fantastic positive things arise from dog microchipping. Now, that's why the UK government then went on to cat microchipping, because they wanted to see the same sort of things happening with cats. Now, cats are a very different species to dogs, not just from the obvious, but also there are 3 types of cats, whereas there is only 1 type of dog. There is a dog, which is owned by a person or it's straying. Unfortunately, well, and mainly in that obviously applies to Europe and the UK. Outside of that, there are other types of dogs. But in Europe and the UK, there are 3 types of cats. There are owned cats, there are feral cats, and there are community cats. And this piece of legislation, which comes into place, as you rightly say, IAS, next June, will only make it a legal requirement for owned cats to be microchipped. And so therefore, community cats and feral cats do not have to be microchipped. And I think that'll be a challenge to see where we go with this. At the moment, cats being microchipped is around about 70%. Now, if we can get that up to 90%, the same as we did for dogs, brilliant. But I think that that there are challenges because how do you tell the difference between a community-owned cat and an owned cat is one of the big challenges. But I think it's brave of England to be doing this, and obviously the RSPCA and other rescues will be working with them to make this a success. There are obviously differences as well between cats and dogs in terms of their impact on humans. The reason why we went with dog microchipping first before cats was because dogs bite. Cats rarely bite and therefore have a huge impact on humans. You can get dangerous dogs, you don't really get dangerous cats. And that's another major difference, because the microchipping was brought in to try and regulate and decrease the amount of dog bites and the amount of dangerous dogs. Whereas with cats, it's much more about reuniting a cat that has been lost or sadly perhaps involved in a traffic accident and been killed with the owner. And I think that is possible. But as I say, there are unique challenges to cats because there are different sorts of cats that we didn't have with dogs.
Yeah, thank you, David. And just a question from the audience here, maybe relevant to you, Paul. I know that Ireland is very meticulous about ensuring that every single puppy is in fact microchipped. There's a question around sort of the implementation of microchipping obligation. You know, should this be carried out by veterinarians, government entities? You know, how do you make sure that in fact every pet in the country or every puppy in the country is in fact microchipped?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think you know, the good part with Europe is that we have different data points, so we can see how effective it is. You know, in some countries you can self-register a microchip. The problem then is the provenance of that data. How do you know that that's accurate? So me personally, I think that, you know, having a veterinarian to check the ID and to check a proof of address removes that issue. You know, like I think having some types of joined up thinking and having similar requirements for the different microchipping databases. You know, in the UK, you've got over 20 of them, and they just have simply different ways of working, different pricing models. You know, some of them they charge every time the registration is done, so that hinders that registration change. So in Ireland, it's a much smaller market. There's 4 registration databases. They're also required to share their information with EuroPetNet. So EuroPetNet is a way that you could put in the microchip and see if you find an animal, you can see quickly which microchip database it's on. I think at the minute in the UK, there's only 3 or 4 of them that are signed up to EuroPetNet. So, you know, I think there's great information there, but I think that you need to have and a little bit of what David talked earlier is, you know, you need to think of that end-to-end step and how it all should work together. You know, technology can solve a lot of these problems. You know, and I think that's say if the microchip is that point where we're going to depend on, and I think it's a great way. It's you know, the flow of microchips, and if you think about, you know, fake microchips and things like that, that's something that doesn't really happen. It's a good controlled way to know that ID number, and it's, you know, the microchip information is just a 15-digit code. It doesn't have any information about the owner. It's inert, and that's what we need to have the databases. I think having those databases all working together and talking to each other. I believe that you know, in the UK there's a new group for microchipping databases to work together. I think maybe that'll help them all to coordinate and maybe bring a level of regiment to the industry. But I think that there's definitely challenges, and, you know, I think starting maybe more regulation at the start helps the owners at the end with the benefits. So setting up some good guidelines and guide rails for these businesses to operate. But I think that the simple one of being able to register your own dog and not verify that information, that's fraught with danger.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Paul. I think us as Pets for Homes, you mentioned it, Paul. There are 20 plus microchip databases in the UK, meaning if we receive a microchip ID from a breeder, and we do collect these, we have virtually no ability to actually verify the information behind that microchip. 1, because there are so many databases, and 2, because a lot of them don't allow us to, through API calls or through technical communication, actually verify that information. So I think EuroPetNet, which you mentioned, is a great initiative to try to aggregate those databases across Europe into one single database. Nathan, could you maybe share, you know, some of your experience in terms of building specific technical solutions to improve the, let's say, pet acquisition process or the pet buying, puppy buying process, either on the consumer side or the breeder side? I know you've done a lot of innovative things in that space. Could you maybe share some of those?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny hearing about the microchipping environments, because it's very similar in Australia. We've got, thankfully, some great legislation in place. Obviously, all puppies have to be microchipped at 6 weeks old. But yes, same challenges with databases, which are maybe not as accessible as we would like and make it difficult to track all of that back. So yeah, similar challenges around the world. But I think the way we've tried to approach it from a technological perspective is, you know, our actual marketplace itself sort of goes beyond an advertising platform and is more of a end-to-end platform where you don't just necessarily communicate with the breeder via a phone call or a message, but it's all actually done on the platform. So we do try to sort of go above and beyond by having that visibility of the whole process. So you can think of it a bit like a CRM tool or a customer relationship management tool. You know, the buyer can apply with the breeder. They fill out an application form. All of that information then goes through to the breeder. It all takes place on the platform. They can chat through the platform. They can basically, you know, send documents. They can communicate, and breeders can also use it to make sure that they're screening their applicants correctly and, you know, matching the right puppies with the right homes based on things like temperament and lifestyle. And on top of that, we also have a payment solution as part of our tool as well. So breeders are able to send puppy offers, which include things like again, microchip details of the puppy and the parents, contracts, things like that, all can be sent through the platform. And then payments can also be made through the platform as well through RightPaw. So we've tried to sort of add that little bit more transparency again into the process by being able to see, again, end to end how that works. And also be there as, again, that third party in case something were to go wrong or in case there was a dispute. We're able to, you know, have that visibility of the end-to-end transaction, so we can jump in and try and sort of mitigate any issues. So for us, the goal was to create an end-to-end experience for buyers that felt safer and more secure. And the way we tried to go about that was sort of trying to ensure that the whole experience could take place in the one sort of cohesive, holistic experience.
Interesting. Yeah, I think it's super interesting how you're, on one end trying to make the breeders less anonymous by your, sort of one-to-one onboarding, and then also sort of hand-holding throughout the process. I think, great precedent and sort of learning for your peers, including ourselves. So maybe if you move on to sort of the interface between online platforms and regulators, charities, maybe over to you, David. What are areas and ways you think that online platforms can collaborate with organizations such as the RSPCA to increase the overall animal welfare and safety? And maybe what do you do today, and what do you think can be improved?
So I think it's obligatory that we have good cooperation, and I don't think we're starting off from a very low starting place here. In the UK, we have pretty good collaboration between the responsible online pet advertising bodies and the animal welfare organisations. That group has been up and running. It's called the Pet Advisory Advertising Group since for about 10 years, and there is a similar group in Ireland, a similar group in Poland, and many other countries. So I think we already have the building blocks in place, because we essentially want the same things. We want the right pets to be going to the right people at the right time, and obviously for the pet advertising agencies, they want to make a profit. For the RSPCA and the rescues, they want the welfare of the animal to be good. So we share the same things. What we have to do is obviously ensure that the consumer, and we've all agreed that the consumer is not getting as transparent and honest information as they should be doing. We have to make sure that they are coming to those responsible sites to get their animals. And I think there needs to be more work on that, but that's the most difficult thing, because it's weeding out the bad sites, weeding out the bad places and not giving consumers the option to go down the wrong route when they're trying to make this really, really difficult and emotional decision. And it's interesting to look at where does the market decide and where does government decide? I mean, Paul's mentioned rightly that in the UK we have now 22 databases. We started off with 4 in 2016 when dog microchipping came in place, and that obviously going from 4 to 22 is the power of the marketplace. However, the government has now decided enough is enough, and from later this year they will put in place legislation to force all of those database providers to talk to each other, to provide a one-stop shop for people, whether that is somebody checking a chip or somebody wanting to find out where their dog or cat has gone to. So it's really interesting that if the marketplace will be champion, but sometimes the governments decide that they need to intervene and actually bring some order to this. So I think we've got a good start. I think we all share the same desire, which is getting the right animals to the right person at the right time. What we have, the challenge I'm setting us all, is to make sure that everybody shares that goal, because at the moment they don't necessarily.
Thank you, David. I think, Nathan, you touched upon it a little bit, trying to be that end-to-end platform, not only helping consumers find that right puppy from that right breeder, but then also guiding them, in those early steps. Paul, dogs.ie, our platform, certainly as Pet Media Group, we sort of have the joy of being oftentimes the first step on that journey of becoming a pet parent, of you searching for the right breed and finding that right puppy. What are some potential partnerships that you either have in place today or you would like to have in place, where you can also support that consumer in their first steps as they've found their puppy and sort of that puppy has entered their homes?
Sorry, that was a question for me?
Yeah.
So a natural progression for us. So we're very focused on the first step of finding a puppy. And also maybe the step before that is with stud dog listings as well, because the people who are breeding dogs then may need an outlet to find new to find owners for the litter. So the very next stage in that really is vets. So hopefully in the next couple of weeks we will be rolling out a platform just for vets, where they can talk about the services they offer, some of the legal requirements that they're familiar with, and to close that loop a little bit, that the vets can check up the dog in the first couple of days. That's very important to make sure that everything's 100% right. We've explored partnerships with, insurance agencies or dog food companies. We haven't solidified any concrete partnerships. I think there are a natural progression there. Earlier this year, we removed the third-party ads because it's a premium website. You pay for an ad listing, and just to remove some of that noise, and that when you're going through that journey of looking at dogs and comparing them and things like that, and then suddenly a flashing banner comes up for another breeder's website that maybe they're not doing all of the checks. So we removed our third-party ads. So maybe we're open to partnerships, but we're also very, very cautious about what else gets promoted on the website. So that's sort of making sure that message is very clear for people looking and learning about animals. So I think those will be the two things. Would probably be insurance and pet food. We don't want to be the online seller of things, or holding inventory, or toys or pet clothes and food like that. We would partner with a third party.
Great. Yeah. Thank you, Paul. And then, so maybe then over more towards sort of the topic of, I guess, business, money, finances. Nathan, you walked us through how RightPaw works from a user experience perspective, I guess you could call it. If we look into sort of the business model of RightPaw, can you tell us a little bit more about how you generate revenue today, and how it perhaps differs from traditional classifieds or advertising platforms?
Yeah, I think most traditional advertising platforms have a straightforward listing fee, and that's generally the primary revenue source would be sort of your classifieds model. We probably look at ourselves as more of a marketplace model. So we have two main revenue streams. One is on the breeder side. We have a sort of a freemium model of our software, so it's free for breeders to sign up and join and use the site. But we do have a paid premium version that breeders can sign up to, which has some extra features, customizations of basically their puppy application process and their breeding program, so they can do a bit more management of their breeding program in the software. And then on the buyer side, we generate transaction revenue as well through the payments through our site, to provide secure payment protection as well. And we also have a membership to our Puppy Parent Club that members can also buy, which is basically our training and support that we provide new owners. So our training program video series that people can sign up to. So basically all about, again, the transaction sort of side of the ecosystem as well. So we sort of look at it more as a marketplace model, rather than a traditional advertising and classifieds model. That's sort of how we've evolved on our side.
Yeah, I guess makes a lot of sense. So David, when we think about the prices of pets, and obviously that's been tied to the demand of pets, both of those two things skyrocketed during the pandemic, and have since, at least what we're seeing across all marketplaces, return to more normal levels, call them pre-pandemic levels. So both in terms of how many people are looking to find a puppy, but also the prices. Does that also mean that you, as the RSPCA, have seen a reduction in people trying to profit from illegal pet trade as the market has cooled off?
Yes, you're absolutely right, yes, because the market started to cool. I mean, the market went bananas in 2020 because, as we all know, people decided they wanted, rightly, dogs for companionship or mental health well-being when they were all locked up and they didn't see anybody. So all of those things that the messages that we always put out, that dogs are great for people, all worked, but in spades, because we never expected that to happen. And yes, it may be a very unusual experiment, but it showed us clearly that there were a lot of people willing to profiteer on the back of consumers' demand, and also, frankly, on the back of consumers' misery. That marketplace decided to stabilize around about January, February 2021, and the price stabilized and then went down. The dog market is like any market; it follows economic reasons. And if there is demand and it's a buyer's market, the price will go up, as we've saw. Now we're in exact opposite. We are in a marketplace where people are getting rid of dogs. They're not wanting to buy them anymore. And there is always about a 2 to 3 year lag between what is happening in the buying market and what is happening in the rescue market. And by that, I mean to say that the dogs that people got under COVID, and now they're deciding, well, I actually didn't want that dog, and that dog is now costing them more money in vet fees or whatever, or is not the sort of animal that they wanted in the first place. They are then handing that dog over to the RSPCA and to other rescues. And we're starting to see exactly those COVID dogs coming into our care. So rescues are full. We did a survey of all of the rescues in England, Wales and Scotland last month, and we found that they were at 90% capacity, which means essentially they have no more room left. And what we're seeing now is a real challenge for the rescues, because people are still handing over dogs, but there's no room left. There is nobody wanting to rehome those dogs because it is no longer a buyer's market. And yes, that has meant that the people that were making a lot of money on the back of people's misery possibly have gone on to other things like drugs or other illegal activity. But there are still, I'm afraid, people out there. We need to be really wary, and we need not to be complacent. There are still people out there that are making money on the back of people's misery. There are still something like 20, 30,000 dogs coming in from Romania into the UK every year. There are still something like 10, 20,000 dogs coming in from Ireland. And whilst Ireland has some great legislation on sales of dogs, that legislation is obviously only as good as enforcement, and Ireland has some challenges on enforcing the dog breeding legislation in Ireland, for instance. So yes, let's use COVID as a bit of a wake-up call. Look at what worked, what didn't work. Try to close those loopholes. Try to make sure that if we do have another situation like that, that we're ready for it. But let's not get complacent, because there are still people out there who are deciding that making money on the back of people's misery and on the back of the illegal dog trade is a good thing for them, because it is a very transient issue and they can make money very quickly and then disappear. Let's make sure that all of our systems are as robust as possible to drive them away and let them find something easier to make money from, which is not dogs and cats.
Yeah, thank you, David. I think us operating across 6 quite different markets, we very clearly see the difference in, on one end, regulation and legislation. So UK certainly being, at the forefront of that, whereas if you look at some of our Southern European markets, pet shops are still entirely legal. You can walk into a store and effectively buy a puppy with without any knowledge of where that puppy was bred or who the breeder actually is. And so what we're trying to establish is, I guess, our own standard, which sits above those local legislations and jurisdictions, to ensure that we at least become that, at least our ambition is to become that safe alternative where you actually are in contact with the breeder and there's more transparency. So on that topic, maybe Paul, you charge a listing fee for breeders to advertise dogs on your site. And what we've found is that fee is not only on one end healthy for business, it generates revenues for the business, but it also means that by introducing a fee, you typically also introduce a filter for people to just flood listings or flood advertisements onto your site. Can you maybe talk a little bit about the balance there between the business aspect of it and the, I guess, trust and safety aspect of it?
Sure. So we started off like many platforms being a free platform. We've tried and tested many pricing models. One of them was, charging per dog in the litter. So if it was 2 dogs or 5 dogs or 7 dogs, there could be a different price. Sadly, we saw that people just weren't putting in all the information into the advert. So we tried many numbers and many things, and we came to this number of 50 euros. Basically, that kind of covers average litter. Let's say there's 5 or 6 dogs in it. I'm sorry. We came up.
Okay,
Oh.
I found this.
There we go. Sorry about that. So we came up with the number of 50 euros to support that, and that's also, we have Monday through Sunday, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. support. Generally, you'll get a response within 15 minutes. So we wanted to give that level of, let's say, customer care, both on the buyers and the seller side, and that we needed to charge a premium price to be able to offer that. So some of that's just, let's say, economics. But blocking people, I still don't think that it's a full deterrent, whatever the price is. So maybe it's a less of a deterrent. Like we still refund about 6% of ads that are submitted to us, and about 7% of ads that are submitted just get blocked before that. So there's still probably 13-14% that either don't meet our quality regulations or they've been blocked previously. So that's what we've done, and we lay in a little bit of security into that by blocking credit cards, by blocking prepaid credit cards, by blocking the virtual credit cards where you can create a new number every day. I think that's, I think that the breeders see there's a value in that somebody else has been blocked, and that the overall quality should shine through. That's what we've seen, and it hasn't really hindered the number of adverts that we see. Of course, if you're starting from a free model to go all the way up to 50 euros might sound like quite a jump. But I think for people who are breeding, and they see that there's less, they're side by side when they're right, in the corgi listing, how good is the rest of the corgi listing, right? You're kind of, that's their competition, right? How are they all good? Are they all bad? Or is there some good and some bad? So we try to make sure that there's the level of quality in the listing is there as much as possible.
Yeah. Thank you, Paul. So just to wrap up, maybe if we all look in our little crystal ball, try to project what will happen in the future. Maybe just to go around the virtual table, what are some trends that each one of you thinks will shape, our platforms or the way people find puppies or dogs in the future? Maybe starting off with you, Nathan. What are some trends that you've spotted from your end?
I think on our end, very similar to what David mentioned. There's that 2-3 year lag between what the buying market sees and what the shelter market sees. And I think for us in Australia, we thankfully haven't seen that yet, but it is something that we're very mindful of. And as Right Paw, we've been very much focused on the breeders to start with. It's sort of been part of our ethos that, if you can actually match the right puppy with the right owner at the right time, then hopefully you stem that tide of dogs ending up in shelters. But I do think that's, a natural next step for us now in the next 2 to 3 years is to really focus on ensuring that, there is a closed loop and that all dogs can find the right home, and working with shelters to help achieve that outcome. And actually, we of course have an RSPCA in Australia as well, and we've actually just been through a process with them to meet their guidelines for the online sale of pets in Australia as well. So, they've been a great partner to work with, and we're excited to work further with them on the shelter side of things as well. So I think that will only become more important for us personally in Australia in the next 2 to 3 years.
Thank you, Nathan. Thank you. And then David, from your perspective, what are some trends that you think will shape the coming 3 to 5 years?
So I think in terms of the public demand for dogs and cats will increase. So we've just had some population data through in the UK, which has shown a steady increase in both dog and cat populations over the last 5 years, and I don't see any sign of that slowing down. Of course, it's quite a low annual increase, but that's good, because all of us are in the industry of making sure that we know that pets are good for people. We know that people are good for pets, but it's trying to match them together and have that really good synergy. So I think that will continue. I fear that there may be a trend in the buying market for breeds which are more marked, particularly, for instance, on brachycephalic dogs or even brachycephalic cats, Scottish fold cats, and I think there's a real challenge here for the advertising sites as to where they draw the line. The RSPCA itself believes that some breeders who are breeding some of the more extreme breeds, such as American bullies or pugs with really extreme features, are breaking the animal welfare laws. And I think there are challenges here, not just for the RSPCA, but for pet selling sites, because should they be blocking those people from advertising those dogs because they are so extreme? The quality of life for those animals is poor to non-existent. In terms of regulation, I don't see that slowing down any time. Both the UK and Europe have huge pieces of legislation being discussed at the moment on controlling the World Wide Web and on social media. And I think that will be the start of this balance between what rules. Is it the market or is it legislators? And I think legislators, particularly in Europe, we've seen, just this week, we've seen the EU hand over the biggest fine ever to a social media company for breaking the rules. And I think that the regulators are fighting back. So I don't think regulation will slow down, but I hope at some stage that we will see what we all want, which is that perfect marriage between the number of people wanting to get a dog and the number of dogs and cats available, and getting them to the right person at the right time at the right money.
Thank you, David. And just to finish off with you, Paul, what are some trends that you're seeing?
So I'm really excited about what a microchip can do, and there are some companies now who are building in diagnostics into microchipping, which I think, being able to take a dog's temperature or have some more information when a dog is ill, and the owners understanding that and being able to take action. But one of the other ones that Dogs.ie has used in the last couple of years is this two-factor authentication with a microchip number. So when you're going to enter in the microchip number, it checks with the database to send a message to like an authorization code to make sure that information is accurate. I think closing the loops on some of that, like a lot of this information is already available. It's not connected, or it's very, very hard to do. But this VeriPet system that's designed by EuroPetNet, we were the first website to launch it, and really make sure that information is accurate when you are buying the dog. It sends you a text message or an email that's to the information that's on the microchip certificate, and it closes some of those loops. So some of that stuff is already available. I think we just need to maybe help encourage other platforms, other databases to think about it and to join it all up together. And I think we have the solutions there. And I think that's a little bit of technology goes a long way for sure.
Thank you. I know we're almost running out of time. I just wanted to end with some questions, and maybe we can try to keep the answers just a little bit shorter, just so we run through them. First one is for you, David. Do you have any views of the old Swiss system where prospective owners had to pass a theory test on responsible pet ownership?
Yeah, funnily enough, I was just, as you were asking, I was just typing in the response to that. So the Swiss system, I don't know if you know the Swiss political system, but they have a really good system whereby anyone can propose a referendum, which, if it passes a certain hurdle, can then get discussed. And they did pass a law which meant that anyone that wanted to get, I think it was a dog, had to pass basically a competency test, like having to drive. It's a really interesting experiment. As far as I'm aware, Switzerland is the only country that have tried this. I don't believe that law is still in place, because I believe there were some real challenges behind this. But it was a really interesting experiment in Switzerland as to how to solve the problem that we all agree happens, that the main problems for animals comes from when people, and because dog purchasing in particular is such an emotional purchase, but people decide to get an animal without understanding the needs of that animal, the costs of that animal, and the impact of that animal on themselves. And because animals are still considered as a throwaway issue, people believe that they can get it, they make a mistake, and then they can hand it over to a rescue organization and nobody bothers them again. And we need to have a much better system in place to make sure that people understand their responsibilities of having an animal. It's not a right, it's a responsibility. And once we do that, then we'll be in a better position. Whether or not that is regulation like Switzerland tried, I'm not sure. But we still need to try and get that better system in place. It's not easy because, as I said, purchasing a dog in particular is such an emotional purchase. It's unlike any other purchase a human being makes. And once the person has decided they're going to do that, nothing can interrupt that purchase behavior. But we do need a better system so that people understand if they're going to get an animal, it's not just, oh, I get an animal and if it goes wrong, I don't care, I'll dump it. It's, I need to get an animal because I really want that animal. I've already worked out how I'm going to care for that animal. I've already worked out how I'm going to finance that animal, and then go ahead and do it.
Great. Yeah, thank you, David, for giving some color on that. Nathan, next question for you. Have you become an educator for breeders, especially non-traditional breeds? Do you set the criteria for health testing, etc.? What if breeder does not yet do all the tests that you recommend? Do you insist they should, and you know, do you exclude them if they don't? That's the question.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Beverly, for the question. Great questions. I don't know if I proclaim to be an expert in breeding, so I wouldn't call myself an educator per se, but we do try to promote as much education for breeders as possible. And we work with some partners that do, including other preeminent breeders in Australia, and also some medical experts as well. And I think that, yeah, especially for the non-traditional breeds who maybe feel ostracized a bit by the clubs or the kennel clubs that they're not able to join. You know, we wanted to make sure that we welcome them into the community as much as possible, and gave them the resources and the education to thrive and improve their breeding programs. Because again, rather than sort of create a bit of a Wild West, we wanted to try and create an inclusive breeding environment, and education definitely is at the heart of that. We do set the criteria for health testing, so we have core and additional health tests for each breed, which our veterinary team works through. And if a breeder doesn't do all of those tests yet, that's fine. We do transparently display that, and buyers can actually filter through different breeders depending on the health tests that they do. And ultimately, we encourage breeders to add more health testing to their profiles and verify that with us, because it improves the quality of their profile. It means that they'll get more applications from savvy buyers that are looking at the health testing that breeders are doing. And just finally, on your last point, we do have that as part of our code of ethics, that every breeder has to accept a dog back at any stage in their lifetime if the owner is no longer able to care for that dog. That's something that, yeah, is critical to the responsibility of the breeder, and also, again, stems the tide of that dog ending up in a shelter. It means that the dog always has a place to go back to, which is the breeder, and the breeder has to agree to that. But yeah, lots of questions in there, Beverly. Happy to chat afterwards as well. You can reach out to me over LinkedIn or something separate. We can have a chat.
Thank you so much for everyone's participation, and for the listeners, and obviously for Unleashed for organizing the panel in the first place.
Yeah, big thank you to you for a very interesting and exciting talk. Big thank you for all the audience who will now close the session. And yeah, happy to see you next time for the next talk. Have a great end of the day.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Everyone.
everyone. Great to meet you.
Bye-bye.